How we doing, man? We're in a much better frame of mind than we were probably 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, probably.
Well, I mean, I think if you drew it up, right, and you said, "Hey, last week of the season,"
If you drew Christo it up,
if you drew Christoed it up, and last week of the season you got a chance to win the Big Ten regular season championship, we'd have taken that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too. Like you look at, I always joke about this. You look at the preseason Big Ten coaches poll and like projected order of finish, and you have one team in Nebraska that was projected to finish fifth, and Illinois, who wasn't even in the top at the top of the standings. So it should be a fun weekend. A lot of scoreboard watching, and yeah, I mean, you would have taken this. And if a month ago you said you're going to be in a position to win the conference, potentially outright, and oh by the way, you're going to have two guys back in the pitching picture that you weren't even counting on at the start of April. That's not bad. I mean, it's been a little bit of a bumpy ride at times, but rarely is college baseball a smooth ride. So, you go up to Michigan State and take care of business and hope that maybe karmically Purdue gives you something back for the stuff they pulled with the tarp a few years ago.
The infamous tarp game. Well played there, Brunsey. I had forgotten all about. Your level of intellectual petty is fantastic. It's like I think it's unparalleled.
I don't even, and it's not even that it was like happened in Nebraska. Like it's those kinds of shenanigans are just like, really, like, come on, like we can see what's going on here. Like you had a window, you didn't play it, so Nebraska got what they deserved that year, but we'll see if Purdue's been a really tough out this year. So I would not pencil in two easy wins for Illinois in that one.
Brunsey, as you kind of look at, you mentioned some of the up and down nature of the season for Nebraska, especially through a lot of April, and then just even recently they dropped 3 in a row before getting those last 2 against Indiana. What is there something specific that you've seen? You're like, hey, I kind of feel better about. Is it just getting some better pitching performances out of guys, whether it's Jackson Brockett or having Christo get some good innings in relief? It is just as simple as like, hey, some of the arms that need to be better have started being a little better?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that has been missing for most of the year is that the Sunday starter or the midweek guy, it's basically the same person in a lot of ways. Like the guy that starts on Sunday is probably interchangeable with a guy that's probably a midweek guy who is somewhat interchangeable with a reliever that can give you multiple innings of relief. And Nebraska, for the most part this year, has not had the Rockets going 5 innings against Indiana was the second time all season they'd had a guy go 5 innings on Sunday. And the starting issues in midweeks are pretty well documented. And Jalen Worthley would give you 2 innings of relief, but beyond that, there weren't a ton of guys in that bullpen that you would go to and say, okay, give me 2.5 or 2 2 1/3, which I think is what Caleb Clark gave him on Saturday against Indiana, or the 4 innings that Drew Christo gave him on Sunday. They just haven't had that. And then when you don't have that, you're passing the bucket, and it's always a bit precarious when you're passing the bucket, especially on a weekend. So, I mean, Clark reemerging has been really important. Brockett's reemergence, I mean, that's been a bit of a godsend, because when you start looking towards what does the Big Ten tournament look like, or, what does anything look like beyond that? I mean, you have right now 3 starting options that you feel pretty good about. McConaughey has been great the last couple times out.
Yeah.
And, that picture looks a heck of a lot different when you have 3 guys you can rely on starting on a regional weekend versus 2, and just kind of hoping that, you can piece it together in a third game.
When you actually look at the matchup with Michigan State, how important is or isn't it for Nebraska the way that Michigan State is built on the back end to get off on the right foot? Because it hasn't seemed to really matter because they've squandered some things late, but there's some vulnerability there for Michigan State too. What are some keys for you if you're playing matchups?
Yeah, well, you got to figure out a way to get some big hits. I think Friday, backing up Sears, or on Thursday, sorry, I'm all screwed up on my days. Starting Thursday, you back up Sears with a couple early runs. You start feeling pretty good about things. A quick start would be important, I think, just given kind of the gravity of what's out there for the weekend. Michigan State's a really kind of hard team to wrap your arms around because, I mean, they lose 21-3 on Saturday last week against Minnesota. They get up 12-2 in the sixth inning and end up losing 15-12 on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And they have in other games given up a lot of runs as a staff. I think it's close to 8. Their ERA as a group is close to 8. So there's the potential for some offense for Nebraska there. But if you can kind of you get a few more hits, score a few more runs, I think the pitching will be okay. But Michigan State's got plenty to play for too. They're in a 3-way tie for 7th. They're kind of playing for an opportunity to get to Omaha and get into the tournament. So, you would think that there'd be something for them to show up for. So I just think for Nebraska, you gotta get the offense going a little bit early in the series and, just hope that your 3 guys, your 3 starters can give you some depth in those games.
Bruntz, what's the value? Is there a tangible value of finishing first ahead of Illinois versus finishing second going into the Big Ten tournament in your mind, or is it more just about making sure they're playing well heading into the postseason?
I don't know. It would be. I think it would be a confidence builder for this team. I mean, I don't know that at any point this year you would say that they've kind of played their A baseball game. I mean, I would think the closest you could maybe say actually was this past weekend against Indiana. I mean, that had the feeling of a postseason weekend, like with the crowds. It's a good team. They've got some guys that can really hit and some decent arms. I mean, I felt like every guy that was coming out of that bullpen that weekend was like 6'4", some kid from like rural Indiana just pumping 97, and Nebraska handled it pretty well. So, I think the standings piece of it's big. I mean, they want to win a championship. I don't know if a regular season championship kind of helps the resume a ton when it comes to selection time, but I mean, for as kind of up and down as the last month has been, that'd be a kind of a fun finish for this team to do enough to get up and lift a trophy. So that matters. And then just playing good baseball going into the postseason. I mean, like I said, I think there's still a lot out there for this team if they can just play some consistent baseball down the stretch here.
Hey, so Bruntzy, I asked you this last week, and you kind of walked me through scenarios and how they'd like to maybe use the back end. But is Worthley, is he your closer? Who's closing for Nebraska in your opinion?
I don't know.
Do you feel like we should, or is that part of the allure?
I don't know if it's a lure. Like, is it?
It's like what? I don't like. I don't have a good.
Like, if you don't have a starting quarterback, if you have your quarterback by committee or your running back by committee, you don't have a starting running back. Is it that kind of a situation? I don't know. But on Friday last week, their hope was that Worthley would be able to give them a 2-inning save. That was what they wanted, and for whatever reason, Indiana just had him squared up right from the get-go, and then that was kind of on to plan B and C, and you kept going on down the line. So, I don't know right now say that they have one guy. I mean, I think they trust Worthley in that situation. I think they trust Dice to a degree. But beyond that, I don't know that there's not like a Trevor Hoffman or a Vera situation where it's like, this is our guy. We just got to get to this guy in the ninth. I think it really is a little bit more situational. And I think that to a degree has kind of caused some of the issues.
Yeah, I agree.
When they've struggled to close games. And it hasn't been that frequent. Like five, I think they've lost leads in five games in the ninth, 4 games in the ninth, something like that. But I mean, when it goes south, it goes south. And I think part of that is just you don't have that defined role, coming out of the back of the bullpen.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Brunt's going to change gears here on you a little bit as we obviously have Husker baseball coming up starting today as they finish the regular season, and then next week at the Big Ten tournament here in Omaha. But I wanted to kind of talk about the Nebraska football recruiting a little bit here. Obviously, they had a big visitor weekend this past weekend. You see that they're in the final 2 with Alabama for a Dawson Merritt. David Sanders is a super high 5-star. You've got a bunch of guys like Michael Terry seems to be pretty interested in Nebraska, another 5-star super high level athlete. Like, is this kind of are you surprised at all at how many super high level guys Nebraska's in on right now? Because I'm a little, I don't know if taken aback's the right word, but I wasn't necessarily expecting it at this point in the process, if that makes sense.
Well, I think part of it, Bruntz, is the narrative that, they only polish up fast 3-star guys, right? Like, that's probably part of it.
Right.
No, probably, yeah.
I mean, when you have the head coach saying that that's the type of program they are, I mean, you take them at their word a little bit. I think you can have two things be true, right? I mean, you can lean on your camps in the summer to find a kid that's got an offer from Penn and shows up and runs a 4.4 and, long jump or broad jumps almost 11 feet. I think you can do that, and you can also still get in the ring for, a David Sanders or a Michael Terry. I think you can do both. Like, I don't know that this staff is not chasing stars by any means. Like, I don't think that's a concern. I think they find guys that fit what they're looking for. And I mean, Michael Terry fits a lot of what a lot of programs are looking for. So, I think the thing I've been impressed by with this staff is that they've been able to build fast relationships with highly rated guys that have been recruited for a long time. I mean, like, David Sanders has been recruited for a long time, like before Matt Rule was even at Nebraska. And that's why Nebraska was having to play catch up a little bit, but just getting him on campus and getting him to take a look, I think that's pretty impressive. We always kind of say too, we have been saying for a number of years, like, Nebraska, I think, is kind of primed to take off in terms of recruiting, as long as you can, get the on-field piece of it go in the right direction too. So I don't know. It's interesting, like, when you kind of look back at past Nebraska staffs too. I mean, they've been able to kind of swing big, I think, at times early in their coaching tenures, and kind of take advantage of that upward momentum. And I think Matt Rule's staff is doing that to a degree too. I mean, they feel it over there, like they're, gonna break through sooner than later. And I think that kind of comes across in the recruiting process too. So I guess my long answer to your question is, or short answer, I guess, is you can kind of do both. I mean, you can find the hidden gems, and they've done that. They've got a couple of guys committed in the class right now that were kind of unknowns for a lot of people. And, also get in there and battle for the type of recruit that everybody wants and is battling for.
Bruntz, when you're watching guys that they're recruiting or have said yes, and even with Latif, it gave me kind of a visual to how they want to build this thing. Can you see from the outside looking in how they're trying to put these rosters together in terms of being a developmental program? Like, let this guy do this for X amount of time. In the meantime, this guy can do this for this amount. Like, is it starting to take visual shape for you too as you look at the roster positions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the types of positions that they've gone heavy on too early on. I mean, I think you can see the priorities there too. I mean, you look at the number of offensive linemen that they've taken in their first two classes, and I think they saw a need there, and also like, look, it's gonna be a couple of years before Grant Bricks is ready to go, or Gibson Pyle, or those guys that are going to be kind of that next wave of offensive linemen. And they did kind of the same thing with the defensive line too, where they moved some guys over, they got some guys that could be offensive linemen or defensive linemen. I mean, it felt like they kind of started to build those positions first. And yeah, I mean, I think you're starting to kind of see what their vision is. The thing that I'm going to be curious about is the way that they kind of go forward with skill position players, because I think the ideal offense that they're going to run and they want to run was not what we saw last year. And I kind of wonder how closer they are now to being able to kind of have that ideal balance of wide receivers and running backs and things like that. So I mean, that kind of bears following. But I mean, I think you can kind of see the even kind of the calendar that they work off of. I mean, like the camp season is going to be big again in June. I mean, I think they're going to try to find a guy or two from that post-grad camp that can come in and help them right away that nobody else is really aware of, kind of like the James Williams things last year. So I've been impressed, I guess, that it seems like they've been able to kind of pull from a lot of different places, and how they've been able to accumulate their talent and kind of make that gumbo work, I guess.
Bruntz, do we give Donovan Raiola enough credit for the job he does as a recruiter? I know he started getting flowers as a coach over the last year or so because of the development of that line, but you mentioned some of the guys that he brought in last year, Grant Bricks being the headliner, and then you see some of the guys that they're in on this year. Do we need to start maybe talking a little bit more about Raiola and the ability for him to connect with these high-end offensive line prospects?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's done a really nice job. I mean, I think you have to give credit to Coach Rule's done a really nice job with some of those guys too. I mean, he was really key in the Grant Bricks recruitment, in getting him to come to Nebraska. But if you look at the places where Nebraska seems to be getting a little bit more of a foothold with linemen, he's done a really nice job of getting Nebraska into Las Vegas again. Utah at times has been kind of a tough place for Nebraska to recruit. And I think he's got Nebraska in a lot more recruiting conversations in that state from just the time he spent there. I mean, he spent a ton of time in Utah building relationships and getting around and kind of leveraging, former Huskers that are coaching out there. And, from talking to recruits and the way that he just kind of builds that relationship, I mean, he's just constantly texting guys, really kind of going to bat for guys in some ways with, whether or not he's an offerable guy or that kind of thing. I mean, Jason McChaychok's an example of that, where, Donovan Raiola really kind of went to bat for, him being a guy that Nebraska needed to get as an under the radar kid. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of been a full-time assistant for going on 3 years now at Nebraska. I think he's definitely gotten more comfortable with the recruiting piece of it. And I mean, even with the media, he just feels a lot more at ease than when he first got there. And I think he's kind of figuring out how he is as an assistant and what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, I think and the interesting thing is, because he doesn't always say a lot to us, I was a little taken aback, and I think that is the right word or term. He's got a ton of stroke, right? He doesn't talk a ton, but when he does, or he has suggestions, or he wants to do something, man, folks move, and they move in a hurry.
Well, I mean, you've seen him at practice, Damon. I mean, there's not ever there's not ever any question about what he's trying to get across. I think it's probably the fair way
good point.
to say it. I mean, it's funny. We're like, well, we can't use that video. Can't use that video. Can't use that. Do we have some ambient music that we can throw over the back of that practice clip so you can't hear what's going on? But no, I mean, I think when you talk to the players in his group, it's very clear that they respect the culture that he's built, and it's been kind of impressive to watch how that's kind of come together across two coaching staffs. I mean, he's had to fit in with a group that he didn't really know at all coming in, and that they've got a good amount of depth in that offensive line group that they didn't have 2 years ago.
Bruntz, what level of confidence do you have in Nebraska's ability to close on, whether it's the offensive lineman or like a Michael Terry, but to close on some of these super high level guys that they're taking swings on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got momentum with, guys that are towards the top of their board. You mentioned Dawson Merritt. I mean, I think Nebraska has come.
Yeah, they're right there.
Speeding back into that recruitment. And I think it helps too. His dad, is a football guy. He gets it. They're big on relationships, and that's something that Matt Rule's staff does really well. I think Nebraska, you look at Merritt, Scholl, who was in here as an official visitor. I think Nebraska's closed a lot of the gap with Auburn there too, for him. And, it partially kind of depends on how long these guys are going to play out decisions. I mean, if you go into the fall with some of these guys, I think Nebraska has a chance to kind of back up the relationship piece of it with saying, okay, we're not just, getting it done in June. We're going to, get it done in the season when it matters too. So, I mean, I think there's been a few recruitments already too with this staff that I would, going into it would not have said that Nebraska had a great chance, but they've been able to close the deal. Ja'Cory Barney is another example of that, where it's like a kid's got every reason to go to Miami, and Garrett McGuire and the staff did a great job of recruiting him and got that commitment. So I don't put anything past the staff. They're really aggressive recruiters, and they're busy, and a lot of that comes from Matt Rule. Your head coach has to set the pace for all that.
Yeah.
Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Bruntsy, we appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Bruntz.
Thanks, guys. Take care.